BYD just built an EV that turns the battery into part of the car itself. In a normal electric car, the battery sits underneath the cabin like a giant pack the vehicle has to carry around. BYD changed that by building the battery into the structure, so it does more than store power. It now helps shape the car, support the body, and change how the entire vehicle is built. So how is this different from the electric cars already on the road? The car is the BYD Seal, and the technology inside it is called Cell-to-Body. BYD first launched this system in 2022, so this is not a concept car hiding behind glass at an auto show. It is real production technology that has already been built into a vehicle people can buy in multiple markets. The strange part is not that the car has a battery, because every EV has one. The strange part is what BYD asks the battery to do after it is already inside the car. In most electric cars, the battery pack sits under the floor like a large sealed box. The pack stores the electricity, sends power to the motors, and gives the car its driving range. Around that pack, engineers still have to build the rest of the vehicle. They need a floor for the passengers, a body strong enough to handle crashes, protection around the battery, cooling systems, wiring, mounting points, and enough space so the whole design fits together. BYD changed that layout by integrating its blade battery into the body structure itself. The battery is still under the cabin, and the whole vehicle has not literally become one giant battery. The doors, roof, seats, and body panels are not storing electricity. The real change happens around the floor. In BYD's Cell-to-Body design, the blade battery becomes part of the structure of the car, which means the same system that stores energy also helps the body become stronger. That is the idea viewers need to picture. A normal EV carries the battery. The Seal is built so the battery helps become part of the car. That one change matters, because the battery is already the biggest and most important object in an electric vehicle. It is heavy. It takes up space. It costs a lot of money. It sits in the lowest part of the car, stretching across the floor, and every other part of the vehicle has to respect where it is. If the pack is large, the body has to make room. If it is heavy, the suspension has to manage the weight. If it needs protection, engineers have to add structure around it. For years, the industry accepted that as the price of building an EV. BYD looked at the same heavy object and treated it less like cargo and more like a foundation. A simple way to picture it is a suitcase versus a bridge. If you carry a suitcase, it may hold something useful, but your body still has to drag it around. If the same material becomes part of a bridge, it is no longer only adding weight, it is helping the structure stand. BYD's design follows that same logic. The battery has weight either way, so the question becomes whether that weight can do more than sit under the floor. The answer starts with the blade battery. BYD introduced the blade battery in 2020, and it became one of the company's most important EV technologies. The cells are long and flat, shaped more like blades than the round battery cells many people imagine. That shape allows the cells to be arranged more efficiently inside the pack, reducing wasted space and making the battery easier to integrate into the vehicle floor. That shape is what makes Cell-to-Body easier to understand. Instead of building a battery as a separate block, then placing another floor structure above it, BYD's layout allows the battery system to work with the floor structure itself. BYD describes the design as a sandwich structure, with the blade battery integrated into the car's body. In plain language, the battery is no longer hiding below the vehicle as a passive box. It becomes one of the pieces that helps form the car's lower body. The moment you see the design that way, the old EV layout starts to look a little wasteful. A normal battery pack needs its own protective case because the cells have to be sealed and protected. The car body also needs its own structure because passengers need a safe cabin. When those two systems are treated separately, you can end up with layers of material stacked near the same area, each one doing its own job. BYD's idea is to make the battery and body share more of that work. That does not make the battery lighter by magic. It makes the battery more useful. Every electric car carries hundreds of kilograms of battery. If that weight only stores energy, the car gets one benefit from it. If the same battery also improves the strength of the body, the car gets more value from weight it already needed to carry. In EV design, that is a serious advantage, because weight is one of the hardest problems engineers face. A bigger battery can give more range, but it also makes the car heavier. More weight means the motors need more energy to move the car. That can push engineers toward even more battery. This cycle is why EV design cannot depend forever on simply making battery packs larger. At some point, the better answer is to make the battery work harder inside the space it already takes. That is where structural battery ideas become important, because they ask the battery to help solve the problem it partly creates. BYD's Cell-to-Body design is one version of that answer. The company says the technology helps improve body rigidity, safety, and space efficiency. Rigidity sounds like a boring engineering word, but drivers can feel it even if they never name it. When a car turns, brakes, accelerates, or hits rough pavement, the body is constantly taking force. If the body flexes too much, the car can feel loose, noisy, or less controlled. A stiffer body gives the suspension a stronger base to work from, which can make the vehicle feel more solid and stable. That matters even more in an EV because the battery sits low and carries so much mass. Electric cars often feel planted because of that low battery placement, but the body still has to manage the forces created by the weight. During hard braking, fast cornering, or a crash, that mass does not disappear. The vehicle has to control it. If the battery is part of the structure instead of only being carried by the structure, the entire lower body can be designed around that strength from the start. That is why the Cell's design is not only about range. Range still depends on many things: battery size, battery chemistry, motors, aerodynamics, tires, temperature, software, and how the car is driven. Cell-to-Body does not create free energy. It does not turn a small battery into a giant one. It gives engineers a better way to use the space and structure already inside the car. And space is one of the most expensive things in an EV. Under the cabin, the battery has to compete with cooling channels, wiring, crash protection, sealing, mounting points, and the shape of the body. Above it, passengers still need legroom and headroom. Around it, engineers need enough structure to make the car safe. When the battery becomes part of the body, more of that area can be designed as one system, instead of separate layers fighting for room. That is the practical side of the wow factor. The battery does not only power the car, it changes how the car is packaged. It changes how the body is built. It changes how engineers think about the floor, the cabin, and the space between them. This is also why BYD's choice of battery chemistry matters. The Blade battery uses lithium iron phosphate, often called LFP. This chemistry is widely known for stability, durability, and lower cost compared with some nickel-rich battery chemistries, although it usually has lower energy density. BYD leaned into the strengths of LFP instead of treating it like a cheap backup option. They built a battery design that made the chemistry more useful inside a full vehicle. That safety story became central to BYD's marketing. One of the most famous demonstrations is the nail penetration test, where a steel nail is driven through a charged battery cell to simulate serious internal damage. BYD says the Blade battery passed the test without smoke or flames. For an ordinary buyer, that image is easy to understand. A battery was pierced, and it did not erupt into fire. That does not mean a battery can never be dangerous. Real crashes are more complicated than a lab demonstration. The outcome depends on the angle of the impact, the severity of the damage, the condition of the high-voltage system, the cooling system, the seals, and the structure around the pack. A responsible explanation cannot pretend one test answers every safety question. But the test explains why BYD is confident enough to build around the Blade battery. If a battery is going to become part of the car's structure, people need to believe it is stable. It has to deal with vibration, road impacts, heat, cold, and crash forces. It has to be protected as an energy source, while also being trusted as part of the vehicle's foundation. The deeper the battery moves into the body, the more important that trust becomes. Then comes the question that makes the whole design more complicated. What happens after damage? A normal EV battery pack can already be expensive to inspect and repair. If the casing is damaged, the problem may not be obvious from the outside, and repair shops have to be careful because they are dealing with a high-voltage system. In some cases, insurers and repairers may choose expensive replacements or write-offs when battery damage is uncertain. A more integrated battery structure can make that decision even more important. After a serious crash, technicians may not only be checking whether a panel can be replaced or whether the suspension is bent. They may need to know whether the battery structure, seals, cooling paths, mounting points, or electrical isolation were affected. A small dent and a major structural hit are very different situations, but the more jobs the battery performs, the more carefully damage has to be judged. That is the trade-off behind the breakthrough. A structural battery can make the car stronger and better packaged, yet it can also make certain repairs more complex. A design can be impressive on the road and still create harder questions for service centers, insurers, and recyclers later. The same integration that makes the vehicle feel smarter can make the battery harder to separate from the car when something goes wrong. That does not weaken the story. It makes the story real. Every major car technology has this kind of exchange. Turbocharged engines brought more power from smaller engines, but they added heat and complexity. Automatic transmissions made driving easier, but they became expensive systems to repair. EV batteries removed gasoline engines, oil changes, and exhaust systems, but they introduced high-voltage packs that require specialized training. Cell-to-Body fits that same pattern. It solves some problems by creating a new design, then asks the rest of the industry to build the repair methods, inspection tools, and recycling systems that match it. The reason automakers keep exploring ideas like this is that the battery pack is too important to stay passive forever. It is too heavy to do only one job. It is too expensive to waste space around it. It is too central to the car to be treated like luggage strapped underneath the cabin. That is where the bigger EV market begins to shift. For the last decade, electric vehicles were often judged by the size of their battery packs. More battery meant more range, and more range made the car easier to sell. That logic worked, especially when people were worried about charging and long trips. But there is a limit to solving every problem with more cells. Bigger packs use more material, add more cost, and increase weight. The next stage is not only about making batteries bigger, it is about making them do more. That is why structural battery ideas are spreading beyond BYD. Tesla has discussed structural battery packs. CATL has worked on cell-to-chassis concepts. Other automakers and suppliers are looking at ways to remove extra modules, simplify pack design, and make the battery more connected to the vehicle. The whole industry is moving toward the same basic question. If the battery is already the foundation of an EV, why not design the car around it from the beginning? BYD's seal makes that question easy to see. The car is built around the blade battery, and the blade battery is built into the car. The result is not just a new spec on a brochure, it is a different picture of what an electric vehicle can be. The battery is no longer only a hidden object under the floor. It becomes part of how the car gets its strength, shape, and packaging. That is why the title sounds so strange. A car where the battery becomes part of the car itself sounds impossible if you imagine a normal EV battery pack. It starts to make sense when you realize how much of an EV already depends on that pack. The battery is already under the floor, it is already heavy, it is already central to the design. BYD's move was to make that central part carry more responsibility. The whole car is not a battery, but the battery is no longer just a box. It is part of the body, part of the lower structure, and part of how the vehicle is engineered from the beginning. That may be where EVs are headed. Future electric cars may not win only by having the largest battery or the fastest charging number. They may win by making every major part do more than one job. The motor has to be efficient. The software has to manage energy carefully. The body has to be strong and light. And the battery has to become more than a storage tank for electricity. BYD is not the only company chasing that future. And cell-to-body will not be perfect for every vehicle. Some markets may care more about simple repairs. Some models may need battery packs that are easier to replace. Some designs may choose serviceability over deep integration. There will not be one answer for every car, but once a production vehicle shows that the battery can become part of the body, the old layout starts to feel less permanent. EVs used to carry the battery. BYD is showing what happens when the battery helps become the car.